tonight on CBC Vancouver News. Why the VPD is getting millions in funding back. Also,
it's telling me the demand for psilocybin is real, it's present, and it's huge.
BC's boom in magic mushroom dispensaries and the gray area surrounding their operation.
We had to remove a lot of asphalt just to get access to the seawall.
Rethinking the seawall and an inside look at the damage caused by king tides.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. I'm Anita Bathe. The City of Vancouver has been ordered to restore more than $5 million in police funding. The ruling came down by the province after City Council voted to reduce the VPD's budget for 2021. As John Hernandez reports, while some are concerned about overspending on police, others in crime-affected neighborhoods are celebrating.
For me, I'm just glad this is over.
It took more than a year, but Vancouver's mayor and council have officially been overruled on cuts to police spending.
I do think it took too long.
In 2020, City Council voted to reduce the budget of the Vancouver Police Department by about $5.6 million, a move the police board then appealed.
I remember making these decisions way back in the depths of COVID, which was quite a dark time where all departments are asked to do more with less money.
After a year-long provincial review, BC's Director of Police Services has ordered the city to restore the money to the force. In a statement, the VPD claims the budget shortfall kept it from hiring new officers, and it hopes to use the money to improve public safety in the city. The mandated funding increase, a sore spot for some councillors who voted against it.
And the province deciding that basically police budgets are a blank check that require council's approval is a hit for public accountability of public funds.
The city is using reserve funds to fill the budget gaps, money that critics say could have gone to other programs to support the most vulnerable.
Folks have complex needs, and policing is the bluntest instrument possible to try and address those needs. When all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail.
But other people in crime-affected neighborhoods are pleased. In Chinatown, an influx of vandalism and property crime has taken a toll on residents and business owners. Shortly after our cameras arrived here, someone set fire to a trash can outside the cultural center.
Having that police presence and having that support and knowing that there's safety in the neighborhood, I think that will bring a lot more people that will be coming back to Chinatown, knowing that it's safe.
A spending decision that will have ramifications in the months and years ahead. With municipal elections in the fall, it will be up to the next elected city council to decide how to spend taxpayer dollars. John Hernandez, CBC News, Vancouver.
And police say they have tracked down the alleged getaway car tied to last week's fatal shooting outside a North Vancouver grocery store. Investigators are now looking for the two occupants. iHit is sharing this video of the suspects and says the driver was seen wearing a black hoodie and gray pants while carrying a gray backpack with a single strap. The passenger was wearing a black jacket with a distinct white symbol on the left shoulder. The burned-out Mazda 3 was found Saturday in North Vancouver near Temp Crescent. The daytime shooting happened in a superstore parking lot.
We know that this is a very traumatic event, and people that might have been either in the superstore parking lot or might have seen individuals on March 11th or 12th in the area of the 300 block of Tempe, everybody deals with these circumstances differently. We at iHit have victim services available for anybody that needs to speak to somebody, as well as the North Vancouver RCMP victim services.
Police identified the victim as 34-year-old Milad Rahimi. They believe the shooting was targeted and say he was affiliated with gangs. Well, magic mushroom dispensaries have been sprouting up around Vancouver. There are now 4 storefront retail operations where people can buy mushrooms and their psychedelic compound, psilocybin. Despite being an illegal substance, these stores are operating in broad daylight, much like cannabis dispensaries before legalization. And as Joel Ballard reports, some experts say that the treatment may help those with mental health issues.
In the city of Vancouver, buying magic mushrooms can be as easy as ordering your morning cup of coffee.
You can actually get 10 capsules of 100 milligrams as well.
Around the city, shops are popping up. Downtown, on Commercial Drive, and here on the edge of the downtown east side, where this shop makes no attempt at hiding the products it offers.
I was heavily involved in cannabis dispensaries and building the cannabis movement in Vancouver and across Canada. And I see the psychedelics and mushrooms in particular really being the next step of that process.
Larson is no stranger to bending the law in the name of drug reform.
We kind of operate in this gray area, and I hope to turn that gray area into a lighter and lighter shade of gray. And hopefully, in the next few years, we see a change in the laws around psilocybin mushrooms. Magic mushrooms are a controlled substance. So how can these shops operate? For the VPD, it comes down to having bigger fish to fry. Though psilocybin is illegal and people could face charges, the VPD says it's focused on organized crime and the trafficking of opioids, while the city says it will not hand out business license for mushroom dispensaries. But so far, that hasn't been a problem for Larson. We do have a business license that was granted by the city, and they were aware of what we're selling when they granted that license.
Advocates say there are a lot of Canadians interested in trying psilocybin for its therapeutic benefits.
The demand for psilocybin is real,
but warn there are inherent dangers when people are forced to find the product illegally.
The truth is that prohibition doesn't work, and when people are forced underground, we don't know how safe the substances they're accessing are.
Right now, there's ongoing research around the benefits of psilocybin, which has found it can help with a slew of mental health conditions. Experts that offer clinical trials of the therapy say, in our regular state of consciousness, we have been conditioned to think in one specific way.
When we are under the effects of a psychedelic like psilocybin, all of a sudden, the weight of those conditioned patterns of thinking is lifted, new possibilities emerge. And neuroplasticity, this ability for new connections to form and forge, is enhanced.
She says patients will often undergo transformative experiences and access repressed emotions. But Dr. Christie says therapeutic psilocybin needs to be administered in a safe way, in a controlled setting with a licensed therapist who can help the patient understand what they have experienced. Back at the dispensary,
look at all this good stuff.
Larson thinks it's only the beginning. And as demand grows, so too will the shroom boom. Joel Ballard, CBC News, Vancouver.
The age for youth transitioning out of government care to get funding has now been extended from 19 into the late 20s.
The new supports we're introducing will be available to youth and young adults up to the age of 27. Every young person leaving our care will be able to receive 1 year of unconditional income supplement of $1,250 a month.
After that, they'll have access to monthly funding when they participate in education and mental health programs. The minister says that without proper supports, youth leaving government care are many times more likely to become homeless, end up in hospital with mental health problems, or die before the age of 25. Well, Vancouver's mayor wants to pump $5 million into helping BC land a spot hosting the 2026 FIFA Men's World Cup. 4 years ago, the province withdrew from the bidding process, but has now had a change of heart. The concern at the time was an uncertain price tag. Kennedy Stewart is now asking City Council to back his request in hopes of drawing the prestigious tournament to Vancouver. It tosses aside an initial promise to spend nothing courting FIFA. The mayor says the pandemic has changed all of that, and the emphasis is now on boosting the economy and tourism. FIFA delegates are touring the host countries, Canada, Mexico, and the U.S., before selecting the host cities. In 2015, matches for the Women's World Cup were held at BC Place, with the city kicking in $1.5 million. BC is now working with Washington State to prevent flooding on the Nooksack River. The watershed has presented a risk for both residents on both sides of the border, and the potential for catastrophic damage is more evident than ever. In addition to the 14,000 people forced from their homes in the Fraser Valley last fall, 500 people in Washington's Whatcom County were also displaced. Cross-border planning to address flood risk will begin this month. And back at the beginning of January, king tides and extreme winds pummeled the Stanley Park seawall, causing major damage. Parts of it are still closed, and we've learned the Jericho Pier is likely out of commission for good. I spoke with Dave Hutch, the city's director of park development and planning, this morning. Have a look. King tides happen every year, so what is it about January's event that was so unique and so damaging?
Yeah, so like you said, Anita, king tides are predictable. They happen every year. It was really a confluence of events that really resulted in the impacts that we're seeing today. So what we had, king tide at 10 a.m., we had an intense low pressure system with sustained winds of 70 kilometers and over for 6 to 8 hours. That was very unusual. So what that low pressure system did was create a storm surge. By the low pressure literally sucks up the ocean and brings it higher. So we saw water levels almost a meter over what was predicted. The kind of additional piece that was really damaging in this was the atmospheric river events that happened in November had dislodged a lot of logs and debris that was just waiting in the Fraser River, were picked up by the king tide, washed around by the wind, and literally acted as battering rams on all our seawall and coastal infrastructure.
Yeah, and you see a lot of the logs piled up here along the seawall still. Can you talk about the extent of the damage? I mean, just walking along here, it's incredible. I mean, parts are just completely ripped out.
So, you know, there's two main things that we're looking at here. So you can see the historic seawall here, individual pieces of stone being rebuilt. That was battered by the logs, and you can imagine the force of the waves knocking the coping stones, which you can see the stones on the top, off. But it was also the overtopping of the water, which washed out the gravel underneath the pavements and behind the wall that destabilized the whole structure and actually caused a full collapse in some areas.
What's going to be the most challenging part about the repair work? I know a lot of it's done already, but there's still more to be done.
So, you know, we've jumped on the repairs. We're basically replacing like for like. In some cases, you can see there's a concrete lock wall that's been placed in behind to further strengthen the wall. But we're doing a fairly rapid set of repairs here. In the longer term, we're really going to have to ask a lot of questions about what is the future of the seawall? Are we going to reinforce it to handle these kinds of events? Is it something that, as sea level rise increases and we get more intense storms, is it something that we're going to have seasonal closures and it becomes what's called a more amphibious structure? Sometimes it's wet, sometimes it's dry.
What's going to be the most challenging part of the repairs going forward, and how much is it all going to cost? Because it's not just the seawall.
Yeah, so you know, the seawall itself, we're on track to reopening probably by the end of March. We're probably looking at somewhere around $1.5 million to restore the like for like, the parts that have been damaged. But the seawall wasn't the only thing that was damaged in the storm. Jericho Pier was essentially destroyed in the storm. We're still completing our assessment, but we're thinking it's a decommission situation. And we're looking at probably $20 million to restore that pier, and those are funds that the Park Board currently doesn't have.
So you're saying that the Jericho Pier could be no more?
It's definitely out of commission right now, and it's looking like we will have to be removing it in its entirety and waiting on future funding opportunities to get it back into place.
Climate change played a big role in all of this, and hearing that news is devastating, I'm sure, to a lot of people. What role does climate change play now in the planning and thinking going forward?
Yeah, it's a really good question. You know, it's sort of this slow-moving, long-term catastrophe, climate change. And so what we're starting is conversations in the community focused around waterfront and climate adaptation. And one of the areas of focus is the West End waterfront. We've got public engagement coming up this summer where we'll be asking people about what they value about the waterfront environment. How much change would they be willing to accept? How can we adapt these environments to more extreme weather, to increased sea level rise, and where do we go from there?
So no king tides in the forecast at the moment, Joe. Very good, obviously, but perhaps the opposite is coming.
Yes, Anita, we do get a bit of a break in the forecast, but yeah, speaking of atmospheric rivers and king tides, that's what we actually got through yesterday, a bit of an atmospheric river. Fascinating conversation, though, reminder of the cumulative effects of back-to-back weather extremes. Let me take you through that calmer forecast, starting with current temperatures. 9 right now at YVR. Temperatures this week will all be seasonal, which is for afternoon highs around 11 for this time of the year. Of course, that's based on just the past couple decade averages. Our baseline has shifted. Seeing the radar begin to clear. We still have steady showers out towards Abbotsford and Chilliwack. That general southwesterly flow, meaning winds are coming from the southwest, will continue to bring in isolated showers tonight. So taking you through the forecast rainfall, here's 5 a.m. You can see rainfall definitely out towards the valley possible, but also some sunny breaks to kick off our Wednesday. Watch they take you through tomorrow afternoon, 4, 5, 6, cloudy with the risk of showers to return. So that window for sunshine, it's quite small. Waking up tomorrow with some good sunshine out there, I think we can keep it going till the early afternoon hours. Overnight lows around 6, back up to a 10 tomorrow. But Anita, that's our best day this week for those who are looking for outdoor sunshine. I'll get you through the rest of the soggy week coming up.
Well, I've heard a lot of complaints today about what's to come, so this is probably good news. Thanks, Jen.
I'll give it to you straight.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
Weather update brought to you by Alegria by Cirque du Soleil. Opens March 25th at Concord Pacific Place.
And speaking of good weather, if you are looking to book a site for a summer camping trip, you can already start poking around a brand new BC Parks reservation website. The site is still being tested, but campers can create a profile and browse their revamped reservation system. The address is camping.bcparks.ca. BC Parks came under fire last year after complaints its Discover Camping booking system was inflexible. It also crashed the first day it launched. Camping reservations open on the new site at 7 a.m. on March 21st. Time now to get right into our search for the best small town in BC. Tonight we head to Cumberland, a small incorporated village in the heart of the Comox Valley. The former coal mining town has become something of a mountain biking mecca, and by extension, an entire cycling scene has sprouted up in the community. And that's where we find our municipal affairs reporter, Justin McElroy. Voting is now open for Vancouver Island communities in the mostly friendly competition. Justin, I wasn't here last night, but you better believe it, I saw your hit with Dan. And well, I wanted to say that you look like a drowned rat, but somebody on my team said that was inappropriate. So I'll say it without saying it.
Not inaccurate.
Yeah. To today, I really want to know what makes Cumberland special and a contender for BC's best small town.
You know, you can see a little bit behind me, right down the hill, a beautiful main street, lots of buildings, more than 100 years old. It's a town with a lot of history and character. It used to be a coal town, a union person's town, a real working class town. I spoke to a counselor, but they said, you know, kids used to tease other kids from out of town and call it Scumberland, but they no longer do that. It's a hip place, lots of young families moving here, has all the marks of a town on the rise, whether you want to talk about bike paths through mountains, cool pizzerias, local craft breweries, a really interesting place. Population growth has been really big over the last 5-10 years, and it's definitely a contender in this competition.
Yeah, who doesn't want pizzerias, breweries, and bike paths? So what town is up against Cumberland and which is winning with voters?
In the first round for Vancouver Island, it's Cumberland versus Zabalos, the little community on the west coast of Vancouver Island, and Cumberland dominating at the moment, 73% to 27%. Of course, there's still hours left to vote. Anything can happen. But if Cumberland goes through, if you take a look at this graphic, they go advance to the quarterfinals of the north end of the Vancouver Island quadrant. Overall, in terms of the top seeds, Cumberland is number 2, right behind Tofino. But of course, the magic, anyone can vote. Anything can happen. Upsets are possible, but certainly we could be talking about a lot about Cumberland and why it could be BC's best small town in the weeks to come.
All right, Justin McElroy in Cumberland tonight. Thanks, Justin.
Thanks, Anita.
A live look from the Ukraine-Poland border tonight, where Ukrainians continue to pour into the EU. 3 million have fled. It's about 7% of the country's population. The latest on the war and the refugee crisis coming up. Welcome to our commercial-free live stream. A large cargo ship that was adrift off the coast of Newfoundland has made it to safety. The MSC Kim ran into engine issues and is now getting repairs done. As Matthew Moore explains, the ship was rescued in the nick of time.
The MSC Kim first ran into problems in the middle of last week. Engine issues caused the ship to go adrift off Port-au-Port, Newfoundland. An icebreaker had to be brought in from Stephenville to get access to the vessel before it was brought into Sydney on the weekend. The Canadian Coast Guard led the rescue operation, and it says Sydney was the safest option.
So with the size of the vessel, she was 265 meters long. It's not every port that had a vessel of that size going to be able to get to, or the appropriate anchorage. So Stephenville was initially identified, but there wasn't great holding ground for a vessel of that size. So the vessel owners worked with our federal counterparts at Transport Canada to determine the appropriate port of refuge, and ultimately it was Sydney that was decided by the vessel owners.
Repairs are now underway on the vessel. The Port of Sydney was happy to see the ship arrive safely in the harbour.
It's good to see. I don't know if a container vessel would have been here 10 years ago, but I know they would have tried or attempted.
And the aid came in the nick of time, too, especially after the bad weather over the weekend.
But considering that the weather system that we had, that came through the area over the weekend, it was lucky that we had the resources there and we got ahead of it. We were very proactive in jumping on this very quickly. Any delay whatsoever could have kind of put us in a very precarious situation. So.
It's unclear how long the vessel will stay in Sydney. Matthew Moore, CBC News, Sydney.
After 20 days of fighting, neither Russia nor Ukraine seem any closer to victory. But the war, like a hurricane, swirling over Ukraine and destroying, displacing, and killing more by the hour. The bombardment of major cities like Kharkiv appears to be ramping up. Government officials say 30,000 civilians were allowed through Russian blockades, including from the starving city of Mariupol. The total number who have now fled Ukraine is 3 million. At least 97 children have died in the invasion so far, according to the Ukrainian president. And there is fresh, urgent concern from the capital that Russia's push for Kyiv is about to intensify. But as Chris Brown shows us, Ukrainians say they are prepared to defend their country any way they can.
One of Kyiv's hippest neighborhoods is now in ruins, a mess of smashed brickwork and glass after Russian missiles hit a nearby factory that made artillery shells. 4 people were killed. We have patriots who truly love our country, said defiant resident Maxim Kreda. We're going to protect this city until the end. I'm not leaving. Kyiv's mayor, Vitaly Klitschko, issued an ominous video message saying today is a difficult and dangerous moment as he imposed a sweeping curfew, warning Russia's assault on the capital may be imminent.
Hi, nice to meet you. You're very welcome.
Remarkably, in the middle of all this, Kyiv received an unprecedented, daring visit by train from the prime ministers of Poland, the Czech Republic, and Slovenia, the first foreign leaders to come since Russia's invasion. We must stop this tragedy, wrote Poland's leader. In Kharkiv, which has been battered incessantly by Russian aerial attacks, firefighters had to use a long ladder to get a stricken woman out of her demolished high-rise apartment. But before they could even get her to safety, the Russian jets were back overhead and dropping more bombs nearby. The western Lviv region has escaped the worst of the conflict, but is dealing with many of the now 3 million refugees from the conflict zone that pass through en route to the European Union. Even here, though, the air raid sirens wail constantly. This is actually the site of a new field hospital set up in the basement of a shopping mall by a U.S. aid agency, which has just started receiving its first patients.
The things they're experiencing play a significant mental and physical toll. So we're seeing that health in general is deteriorated from what they normally would experience.
Help is also coming from people such as Svetlana Strelchenko. She works for a Ukrainian delivery company and helped arrange a donation of medical gear from Germany. She got it into Ukraine and then hired a truck and driver to take it on the overnight journey to Dnipro, far to the east.
I don't know how to say it. It's my homeland. I decided to stay in Ukraine. I don't want to leave. I want to live in this country. I love this country.
Ukrainians have been buoyed by the resistance of their army, but Russia's military is regrouping. They're now in the suburbs of Kyiv, and it seems that nothing can stop Russian missiles from decimating the country with attacks from the skies. Chris Brown, CBC News, Lviv, Ukraine.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky made a direct appeal to Canada today. He spoke to the House of Commons, thanking Canadians for their support of Ukraine. As Ashley Burke reports, he also warned more needs to be done to stop Russia's bombs raining down on his country.
Our friend, Volodymyr Zelensky.
He's the leader of a nation under deadly attack, risking being tracked and targeted by Russia to speak to Parliament Live.
Currently, we have 97 children that died during this war.
Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky spoke about suffering, about the daily death toll, asking Canadian MPs and senators to picture if it was them.
Justin, can you imagine hearing your children hear all these severe explosions, bombing of airport, bombing of Ottawa airport?
His speech laced with references to Canadian cities and landmarks.
CN Tower. Can you imagine famous CN Tower in Toronto if it was hit by Russian bombs?
Zelensky famously using his voice of defiance once again to galvanize support.
You're inspiring democracies and democratic leaders around the world to be more courageous, more united, and to fight harder for what we believe in.
While the Prime Minister was in Parliament, Moscow added him and nearly the entire House of Commons to its blacklist, banning them from entering Russia. This after Canada's latest round of sanctions today against 15 Russian officials. Zelensky expressed his thanks, but called for more and stronger measures, and repeated his plea for a no-fly zone.
Please stop the bombing. How many more cruise missiles have to fall on our cities until you make this happen?
We must do more together with our allies to secure Ukraine's airspace.
But NATO says it can't, fearing that would escalate and widen the war.
At this point, based on the information we have a red line that we can't cross.
I am grateful to Canadian people, and I am confident that together we will overcome and will be victorious. Thank you to Canada.
A standing ovation 3 minutes long. guests in the audience chanting, "Glory to Ukraine." Ashley Burke, CBC News, Ottawa.
Canada is bringing in Ukrainian refugees by plane, but countries that are closer can afford to offer help in different modes of transportation, like Spain sending a fleet of taxis. A group of cab drivers in Spain have organized a convoy of 28 vehicles to bring aid to a refugee center near Warsaw, Poland. Then they're going to pick up 140 refugees at a camp to transport back to Madrid. It's a 40-hour round trip that's more than 3,300 kilometers at an estimated cost of about $55,000. Drivers funded the trip themselves and through contributions. Upon arrival in Spain, refugees will receive a health check, then be set up with temporary accommodations. Newly released court documents are shedding more light on what happened the day a Muslim family was hit and killed by a truck in London, Ontario. CBC News was part of the fight to make these details public. Thomas Dagla takes us through them.
In the frantic minutes following the deadly attack, the driver sped down this London road, blowing through red lights, according to witnesses who spoke to police. The new details come from documents used by investigators to request search warrants. 271 pages now released publicly, months after CBC News and other media asked the court to lift a sealing order, though many details are still covered by a publication ban. On a warm Sunday evening last June, prosecutors say a driver intentionally ran down the Afzal family, targeting them because of their Muslim faith. Salman Afzal, his wife Medea Salman, their 15-year-old daughter Yumna, and her grandmother Talat Afzal were all killed. Only 9-year-old Fayez survived.
These documents show police specifically searched for an axe, a machete, a serrated knife, and an airsoft rifle. They also sought to gather data from the suspect's laptop, as well as 3 external storage devices and as many as 3 cell phones.
After police searched his apartment and electronics, a detective said some documents appeared to be hate-related material and relevant to the listed offenses. An RCMP national security investigator writing, the murders constitute terrorist activity. The pickup truck used in the attack continued straight down Hyde Park Road, turning left on Oxford Street and stopping in a mall parking lot. That's where the suspect was found, kneeling, wearing a green military-style helmet. His truck still running. 21-year-old Nathaniel Veltman wasn't known to the RCMP. Homeschooled until grade 10, he said he had few friends. Now he's expected back in court in April, formally accused of terrorism, with a murder trial approaching. Thomas Dagl, CBC News, London, Ontario.
A nation divided. A new poll reveals that the country is split when it comes to relaxing COVID rules. Why half say it's too soon and others say it's not fast enough. It's next.
With hundreds of hours of fine-tuning, the family station wagon never sounded so good. For drag racers, their cars are an obsession, and this weekend has been a long time coming. Been looking forward to this weekend?
You betcha. You betcha. Been racing up at Ashcroft the last couple of years, and it's just too long a run up the canyon, so it's nice to have it close to home, yeah.
It's the opening weekend for the new Mission Raceway, a 3/4-mile stretch of asphalt where fast cars can race at ridiculous speeds under controlled conditions. Mission used to be home to a similar racetrack in the 60s and 70s, but that track closed down in 1978 because Mission was growing and needed more space. Was that the heyday of the track, do you think?
Yes, really. I mean, that was your years of your high performance Barracudas, the 383s and the 413s and the 427s and 426s in some of the engines. And that was all your big engine vehicles. That was the high performance era.
The old track shut down, and for 13 years, this was nothing more than a memory for drag racing enthusiasts. But this new site was found, and after a lot of bargaining and a lot of hard work, the cars and their drivers are finally back on track.
We got underway, and with a lot of volunteer help, mooching, borrowing, begging materials and everything, we finally put the thing together after 2 years of work, and work parties every weekend for 2 years, Saturday and Sunday, and out here 7 days a week, and it's finally come to fruition.
We've been waiting for this track to open up for a long time. I raced at the old track in the mid-'60s, and this is too long coming. It's great.
Until this weekend, drag racers have had to go to great lengths to practice their sport, sometimes even break the law by drag racing on city streets.
Way back when there wasn't, well, we didn't take the time to go to Seattle or anywhere else we were, but...
Where would you do that?
Oh, there's a couple places out in Surrey. Well, I'm not going to name any roads, but yeah, there was quite a bit going on out in the Langley, Surrey area. And I'm sure the cops are happy that that's been taken care of now.
So now the police can only sit by and watch as racers do their thing within the law and finally in their own backyard. Chris Edwards, CBC News at the Mission Raceway.
Here are some of the stories we're following tonight on CBC Vancouver News. The Vancouver Police Department has won its appeal to the province to get back $5.7 million in funding that was denied in the city's budget in 2021. The force's chief says the financial hit had a direct impact on the number of officers it was able to hire to meet the city's policing needs. Vancouver spends more than $1 million a day on policing.
There's a lot of people who have experienced the benefits of these mushrooms themselves and who want to share that with other people.
Magic mushroom dispensaries are sprouting up around Vancouver more than ever, and despite being an illegal substance, these stores are operating in broad daylight, much like cannabis sellers before legalization. But some advocates say this is only the beginning of the boom. The City of Vancouver is putting up to $5 million toward a provincial bid to bring men's FIFA 2026 World Cup games to the city. Mayor Stewart says the bid is a chance to support the province's hard-hit tourism sector. The announcement comes on the heels of Premier John Horgan reversing an earlier decision not to bid on the 2026 games after Canada, Mexico, and the U.S. won joint North American hosting rights for the tournament. Let's move on to COVID-19 now. It's been a few days since masking rules have been relaxed, and BC's latest numbers continue to decline. Since yesterday, COVID-positive patients in hospital dropped by 14 to 345. The number of people in critical care is down to 50. It's one less than yesterday. No new deaths to report. And starting today, free rapid test kits are available to British Columbians aged 40 and older at select pharmacies. Well, 2 years since the pandemic was declared, many have grown accustomed to the state of affairs, while others not so much. Now, with most provinces easing COVID restrictions, a poll taken by Angus Reid finds Canadians split on the issue. 36% believe we're opening up too quickly, 38% believe we're opening at the right pace, and 20% believe we're not going quickly enough. As Chris O'Neill-Yates reports, it also reveals a deep divide on how Canadians view leaders' handling of the crisis.
What's really interesting in this study is the difference in how people feel depending on where they live. pollster Shashi Kurl says the study doesn't hold any huge surprises, but rather it's a confirmation of much of what we already knew.
We tend to want to aggregate and distill things down to something called the average Canadian. And the fact is, in a country as vast as this, as different as it is along regional lines, demographic lines, urban, rural lines, educational lines, people are going to have very different points of view. And that's what we see coming through in these data.
Canadians are also really split on their opinions about how their leaders handle the pandemic. People in Quebec, BC and Atlantic Canada believe their premiers handle things really well. But in Alberta and Manitoba, they're overwhelmingly critical of their elected leaders. And the chief public health officers, their popularity went down steady. 7 in 10 Canadians approved of their performance when the pandemic started. Only in Atlantic Canada and Quebec do they still enjoy that kind of popularity.
Think all the way back to spring of 2020, when medical health officers were becoming rock stars in their own worlds, and people were treating them like celebrities, and they were inspiring memes and catchphrases. That's all gone. What has happened is, over time, as we have learned to live every day with the pandemic and with the uncertainty that the pandemic brings, as that has taken on sort of a normalization, we also see that our feelings towards our politicians and our chief scientists have also normalized, which means that some people are really grumpy with them and some people are feeling pretty good about them.
And perhaps it won't come as much of a surprise that more than half of us across the country had awkward moments with the people in our lives over vaccines and masking. More of them in Alberta and Saskatchewan, though, compared to people in Atlantic Canada and Quebec. The big picture going forward is many Canadians will keep on doing what they've been doing all along over the past 2 years, even after restrictions are no longer in place. Chris O'Neill-Yates, CBC News, Halifax.
And while pandemic restrictions loosen here in China, things are trending in the opposite direction. Millions of people are banned from leaving their homes as the country goes through its biggest outbreak since the start of the pandemic. And as Susanna De Silva reports, residents expect things will only get worse.
The call goes out. It's time for another round of COVID testing in this district of more than 700,000 people locked down. Scenes like these are playing across the country. In northeastern Jilin, a key car manufacturing center, 24 million people have been ordered to stay home. In financial capital Shanghai, classes have moved online. Things like cinemas have closed. This man says he's preparing for a stay-at-home order too. That order already given to 17 million people in China's southwestern tech hub, Shenzhen, locked down for at least a week. With eyes on what has happened next door in Hong Kong, where 3/4 of their 4,000 pandemic deaths have come in the last 2 weeks alone.
This seems to convince the Chinese policymakers, right, that if they don't take effective measures, what is happening in Hong Kong could be repeated in China.
China's surge is being fueled by the Omicron variant, a variant the Chinese-made vaccines are less effective against. Though cases are still generally milder, China's strict COVID-0 policy doesn't take that into account.
Doesn't matter whether you are mild or severe cases, they're treated the same.
So despite the country of 1.4 billion seeing just 10,000 cases since the beginning of the month, millions are locked down. And factories supplying companies like Apple, Toyota, and Volkswagen shut down with them.
It's 25% of the global economy. And as it revives, that helps generate growth and jobs and opportunities elsewhere.
But with the Communist Party Congress this year, a major political event in the country, experts say the government is unlikely to try any new policy that could affect social or political stability. Susanna De Silva, CBC News, Vancouver.
Settling for less as Canadians try to get a toehold in a hot housing market, how some are downsizing their expectations, and a Vancouver realtor who says that's today's reality. It's next. And at 6:42, a live shot looking down south toward Richmond tonight. The sun is setting. beautiful sky. But will that move into tomorrow? Well, Johanna will have the answer coming up. The Eiffel Tower is a little bit taller today after a new digital antenna has been added to the top. It's now 330 meters high. The new installation adding 6 meters to its overall height. Completed in 1889, the tower was the tallest human-made structure in the world at the time. It lost that title almost a century ago. The tower has fluctuated in height over the years as aging radio antennas are replaced with new ones. The newest tallest tower is the Burj, Dubai. And BC's intention to permanently adopt daylight saving time got a boost from the U.S. today. Senators voted to approve the plan dubbed the Sunshine Protection Act. The bill still needs approval from the House of Representatives and President Joe Biden. Here in BC, Premier John Horgan responded, tweeting that this decision brings the province one step closer to making the change as well. BC outlined a plan 3 years ago to end the twice-annual seasonal time change. That legislation didn't set a date because Washington, Oregon, and California needed to approve the change. I don't know about you, Joe, but I actually really like the time change. It adds a little spice.
Do you?
It adds some spice to my year twice a year. I don't know.
Yes. You know what? I'm undecided. I think I liked it more pre-toddler. I'll say that.
Yeah. I went through it too. I feel you. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, but undecided. So I'll go with the flow on that one. We do get to enjoy that extra hour of sunlight on the back end of our day. A little more tomorrow with that sunshine in the forecast, and then it is back to rain this week. Let me take you through the big picture across the country, starting with the current temperatures tonight. Decidedly spring-like for much of the country. I think this is the mildest snapshot we've looked at this time of the night across the country in weeks. Just a 1 in through Toronto. Toronto's temperatures, by the way, soaring to 17 degrees for this Thursday. We'll see some seaside temperatures on the East Coast and finally getting some milder weather across the prairies. Our next few days laid out for us in the satellite are departing cold front, bringing a few evening thunderstorms to the Rockies. We're seeing that in Cranbrook tonight, and a couple of rumbles of thunder south of the border here in Vancouver. Haven't seen any north of the border. It was a risk so far staying in Washington. Wednesday's our break between systems, and you can see Thursday's Pacific storm hot on the heels. 11 for Victoria tomorrow, 11 in through Kelowna, getting some mild air across the southern interior, 9 in through Cranbrook, clearing skies across the southern half of the province. Williams Lake, Prince George, getting some sunshine for you as well. Up towards the Peace, quite a bit warmer than normal, about 7 to 8 degrees above your seasonal, and even seeing that sunshine up towards Dees Lake. Prince Rupert, rain to start for you around noon, and that's with the next Pacific system to move in. In fact, let me time it out for you. There it is, crossing Haida Gwaii as we head into Wednesday afternoon. That trailing cold front will then fill in tomorrow night into Thursday for the South Coast. Notice the purples, though, showing up. That's more mountain snow. So we're not done with the spring skiing yet, is what I'm saying. But we do have more Pacific systems moving in. Quite mild, though, for the interior. As I mentioned, temperatures all above seasonal. We're about seasonal here in Vancouver. Our overnight lows are warmer than normal, though. Thursday and Friday will be a bit of a washout. I'm watching the weekend closely. I know things are opening up. It's nice to make those plans at this point. Bit of a mixed bag, Anita. So we'll see if I can hone in as we get closer.
A mixed bag, but all I see is rain coming down in those icons.
A mixed bag that will include rain. It's true.
Okay. Thanks, Joe.
You're welcome.
Well, the average price of a house in Canada has climbed more than 20% since last year. In February, costs hit a record $816,000. That benchmark driven by overheated markets like Metro Vancouver, and some predict it could ease. But until then, Anita Bathe reports that many would-be buyers are simply priced out.
Across the country, signs of the spring housing market. New listings are surging as sellers try to cash in on record high prices.
The biggest incremental driver of demand right now is investors and multiple property purchasers.
Investors are driving up competition, and with many average home buyers priced out of Toronto and Vancouver, they're finding more affordable options in cities like Calgary or smaller markets like Kitchener.
We've been trying to save the down payments. And as time passes, with each passing day, you feel that money is becoming less and less valuable.
Wasil Dingra wanted to buy a townhouse close to Toronto. He settled for a condo in Kitchener. He's worried he overpaid, but is happy to have gotten into the market at all.
Now you feel that you're on the other side of the table and that I'm in the market now. And that's a relief because that race has ended.
Still faced with soaring gas and food bills and higher borrowing costs, other Canadians may be feeling buyer fatigue.
There's just a little bit of unease, uncertainty. It's like, well, you know what? Maybe I shouldn't stretch myself on this house purchase. Maybe I should pump the brakes a little bit.
And that sentiment is starting to show up in the market.
There also is a whole bunch of houses that on offer night aren't getting any offers, which, 4 to 6 weeks ago was inconceivable.
If sales listings continue to ramp up and the central bank hikes interest rates as planned, economists expect competition to cool.
Sentiment doesn't take a lot to change. And I suspect that as soon as investors and buyers start to sense a little bit of weakness in the market, you're going to see demand pull back very quickly.
Which could bring some much needed balance to the housing market in the months ahead. Nisha Patel, CBC News, Toronto.
He's earned a black belt in coding. How this Halifax 12-year-old beat out the keyboard competition. Next.
Well, we've had GPS collars deployed on bison since 2016. We've got approximately 20 collars deployed on bison at any time, 10 on the plains bison in the north and 10 on the wood bison in the south. We also have the one special collar that's got a video camera on it. That video camera takes a short clip every hour.
So this goes around the neck of one of the bison. So we had it on a bison for about a year. We've been able to retrieve it. It's been sent back to Germany where the camera's from, and they're downloading the videos for us right now, and we'll send them back, and then we'll be able to look through them all and look at different aspects of the life of a bison through a year.
The information we get from those collars lets us understand how the bison are using the park, what kind of habitats they're using, differences between different seasons and in terms of where they head. It's one large herd that breaks off into little groups, and then they come back and they mingle up and they split off into different groups.
As long as there's buffalo, there will be our people. As long as our people around, there's going to be buffalo. Kind of like that's how closely associated we are with them. We had our own traditional people that knew how to track them, either trail through buffalo trails and stuff, how fresh they were, or the pathways of which way they would be going at a certain time of the year. Helps you, I guess, rejuvenates your spirit, even just for one thing, just being out there and seeing the variety of all of the different kinds of wilderness that exist and where they're at, and what animals are there with them. It gives you a certain level of inspiration. It touches your soul, if you want,
Elk Island's so important globally in terms of bison conservation so that people understand what's going on in the natural world around them. The chance that we have to take information about these animals and find a way to get it across the public in a way that's accessible is very unique.
Isn't this a beautiful sight? Seedlings are one of the great promises of spring. I love seeing them come up. You can have them come up in your own home, but you might need a little extra light because it's the dark frozen tundra out there. So I'm Robert Salisbury, and today we're talking about growing under lights. I have an idea. When I was a kid, we used to use these in the greenhouse with pie plates around them as grow lights. So this guy is an old school, hot as heck, super energy and efficient incandescent bulb. If you still have them, you can use them as grow lights. Remember, now they're only blue spectrum, okay? So they don't give you the full spectrum of light, so you're not going to be able to have anything with fruit. So leafy greens and herbs only. They are quite hot, so keep your plants about 18 inches away. Now we get into grow lights that are actually grow lights. Full spectrum LED, they're made for this. Hook them up to a timer for about 16 hours. You put them over like that, you can get a different assemblies or what have you. And you can do cherry tomatoes, anything with flowers and fruit, really. You can get a head start on spring to put things outside, or just enjoy them inside. Happy spring.
They're the most studied and famous whale family in the world. What's pushing J-Pod to the brink? I'm Gloria Makarenko, host of the new CBC British Columbia original podcast, Killers. Is it too late to save them?
When someone earns a black belt, you'd assume they can throw a punch. But a 12-year-old in Halifax recently earned that recognition. Not in martial arts. As John Tatry explains, the only punching that helped him involved a computer keyboard. Take a look.
I'll bring you to the next maze that I now have to complete.
Noam Pashenko loves playing video games after school.
You are this robot, JMO, on a planet in space, and you're trying to farm stuff here because you found like seeds and stuff like that. Trying to farm for the Earth.
Your astrobot has to solve a series of mazes and avoid running out of battery.
I'll bring you to the next maze that I now have to complete.
Noam is easily the greatest maze farmer player in the world because he built the game himself. He's the first code ninja to earn a black belt in Halifax and one of 13 in the world.
So then once you have the soil placed, then you can Here you can plant it.
Code Ninja is a private company that teaches coding to kids using a belt system borrowed from martial arts. Each belt means you've mastered a new coding skill.
Coding is basically the computer has a bunch of algorithms that it's able to run. So coding is basically just activating those and telling it when to do that, how to do that.
Noam spent 6 months building this game to earn his black belt, which he wears on his wrist.
Here's the scene screen, so you can see everything within your actual scene. Like I'm in the farm scene right now.
Rachel Wong operates Halifax Code Ninja, one of 500 worldwide. She says Noam stands out.
He's actually one of the fastest who finished black belt. So when he first came in, he was like this tall. He was like this big, and he can barely type. He go like that, and right now he can type faster than his dad.
Computer science students, senseis, show the kids what to do.
As they go, if they want to learn website design, almost anything in technology, anything related, we can have them dive into.
Noam sees a future in coding.
I mean, I want to work something technology-wise. Maybe it might be like robotics or something, or just, again, software development.
John Tatry, CBC News, Halifax.
Incredible stuff. I know absolutely nothing about coding, and I'm not sure that I'll ever be able to learn, but kudos to you. That is it for our show tonight. Thanks so much for watching CBC Vancouver News. We'll see you tomorrow.